What's up? What's up? Everybody. Got a thunderstorm rolling through my place right now. So if you can't hear me for a second, you know what's going on. It's a big thunderstorm rolling through, but we're going to work through it, and it shouldn't last but a minute or two. But got my bud on the line here.
What's going on, everybody? No thunderstorm here. Thank goodness.
Now, this is our first show of 2023, everybody, and we're looking forward to a great year and doing this every Tuesday night and talking about today's bite and what's going on. And this year, this show, we're going to kick off your crappie fishing goals for 2023. So if you've got any kind of goals for your crappie fishing, hey, hit them in the comments. Nathan Wood, I see you joined us, man. Appreciate that. All right, Dustin, you're a tournament guy. What's some of the goals you got?
Yeah, you bet. Tournament-wise, my goal is always get better. I guess that's with everything. Me and Ken's been working a lot. Last year was kind of our first year to really get serious with it. So I guess my goal would be to just finish high, get a check every time. I mean, that's what we do anyways, but stay up there with the big dogs and compete every time we show up. We try to make everything fluent, everything that we learned last year, and a lot of little stuff that you learn to help make the process go by faster. So that's kind of like the little things we're working on. I feel like the little things go further in the tournament world. But as far as that, that's what we're going to try to do is make everything go smoother, have an operation. Ken's a big help with that. And then I guess guide-wise too, I've always got always want to get better, bigger numbers, more people. The more people, the better. So that's kind of my goals is just catch more fish than anybody else and try to have a 5-star service all year.
Yeah. I mean, that's the name of the game is putting fish in boat and getting better doing it every day.
Dang right.
I know my goal, I guess, would be, just continue with live scope, learning it more and more, which, it's such a fun process to get better with live scoping. What's up, Brad? I see everybody joining in and commenting. I appreciate you guys coming on.
Larry Leeds. What's going on, Larry?
Name some goals out there, guys. I know somebody's got some.
Yeah, as far as guide wise, I definitely strive to be better on that this year and keep the ball rolling. I feel like I've been out this winter so much that I've got to stay on top of those fish constantly because you got to do things that other people don't, I guess, to make yourself stand out a little bit.
I know myself. I mean, I've got to fish the next 3 days down here on Ross Barnett and really looking forward to it. Kind of took a break the last week or two because of the holidays and deer hunting and everything else. But now it's just kick off 2023. And
exactly. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. You miss it when you're not out there.
Man. You dang right. I do too. Another thing too is paying attention to small details. That seems like that's a big ticket. Really honing in on why the fish do what they do and what they do it for, I guess. Certain circumstances with weather and everything, trying to learn fish a little bit better.
Oh, we got one. Tony Long.
Tony Long's wanting to pull them crankbaits, planer boards. There's an art to that, brother.
Pulling crankbaits, it goes back to, actually one of the first techniques I really got into when it comes to crappie fishing. And I don't know if it's 12, 14, 15 years ago, but I started out pulling that crankbaits and read a couple articles and magazines back in the day were real popular back then, but and decided to go out there and start pulling crankbaits. And everybody looked at me like I was completely crazy. It was, what are you doing out here?
Well, it's back to that. Some people still look at you like you're crazy now.
Yeah, that's for sure.
John Breland, tell me if I got that right or not, but how do you know you're not good enough to be in tournaments? He says he wants to be good enough to be in tournaments. I say the only way to get good enough is to go and test yourself out. Try. I feel like if you're not winning, you're learning. So if you go out there, say you don't do as good as you want to do, you'll definitely learn something because I've been there, done that. I promise you. You don't know you're not good enough till you try. Because even if you're not tournament fishing, you go out there and fish, you can't do as good as you think you do. A tournament's different. It seems like you fish a little harder, you try a little better. I'd say my best performances are always on tournaments. So you might just try it. Do little ones, do little local ones, and work yourself into it. That would be a little tip there on that. A lot of people, I get a lot of messages of that. When did you know you could go fish tournaments? I didn't. I went out there, got my butt whooped a couple times, and tried to learn. And I guess I wanted it so bad that I just forced myself to kind of learn. But I would definitely recommend going out and trying the little stuff.
Yeah, I see Steve Green. He likes to buy every pink 300 he can. You know, talking about the crankbaits just a little bit more, you know, a pink crankbait for me, at least on Ross Barnett, is a catfish and catching machine.
Really?
Absolutely love a pink
Crazy.
crankbait.
So the people that pull crankbaits here on Grand, there is a few boats that do. One guy I talked to, he may be watching this, but he's on a pontoon every year around this time of year, and then the summertime, big time. He pulls crankbaits in the summer, and pink is his number one. I mean, if he ain't got pink on, he swears you put every color, they're going to hit the pink one.
We've got Scott Williams on here. Speaking of Scott, you know, next week, or this coming week, I've got the podcast with Scott and Eric Cagle coming on tomorrow. And it's going to be you know, we cover a little bit of everything. We kind of struggled with a title for this coming podcast because we talk about from building brush piles to how they started fishing tournaments years ago to, you know, everything you can imagine. So it's going to be a really entertaining podcast with those two guys on there, as you can imagine.
Oh, yeah. Eric Cagle's a good time, too. Scott Williams, I met him just a little bit here on the last tournament, but I'm sure if he's fishing with Eric, he's an all right guy.
Come on, let's see some goals, guys. We need some goals out there. John Mayo.
Yeah, John Mayo, he's always having fun and fishing.
He always catches some big ones, too. You can see in his picture right here on the bottom of the screen. He's holding up 2 slabs right there.
Yeah. If you can't catch the big ones, John, I guess you snag them. I still got to learn more about the snag and the crappie. That's unreal.
Matt Wiley wants to beat his state record. Missed about 6 ounces. Man, what's the state record? I want to hear it.
Woo! My goal is to bust that 3-pound mark. Chandos Pittman. I don't know if that's even how you pronounce it, but golly. And start fishing the state trails tournaments. What state trail tournaments would you be fishing? Where you located? That fish on your profile looks pretty good. You'll bust that 3-pound mark in about another month. You mark my words.
Got another goal. Hit that 3-pound mark.
Yeah, Derek Fulton. That's the truth, man. Nothing can teach you better than a good butt whooping on that tournament fishing. You're right.
Yeah, he's a long liner from way back as well. He likes pulling those jigs along with me, I know, or used to.
Brad Edgar. He wants to keep learning live scope and win a tournament at his local trail. That's an awesome goal if I don't say so. All it takes is time.
Time on the water.
Missouri.
You hear that,
Mr. Pittman
from ever.
In Missouri. They've got some good tournament trails out there. I'm trying to think in Missouri where you go catch a 3-pounder, but I'm not sure. They catch
big ones in that. State record is 4 pounds, 9 ounces.
You're telling me he caught? Okay, hold up a minute here.
That's the state record. So he caught what? A 4.3.
So he caught a 4.3. You got to tell us where you caught this 4.3 at, and I'll tell that guy where to go break his 3-pound mark.
Brett has a very good goal as well. You know, better boat control, and I think that goes back to the live scoping. You know, you look at guys are really on the top end of things. Boat control is definitely probably the biggest key in my opinion as far as live scoping goes, is boat control with it.
Boat control is big. And I would recommend if you are trying to learn that boat control, if you've got any power poles with paddles on it or a trolling brake system in the back, helps a lot with that boat control. Yeah, 4 pound, 3 ounce. That's a big old fish.
Guys, I know this week I've had several calls and people ask me about, you know, different questions when it comes to where I'm catching fish at and different things, but or even questions about techniques. If you've got any kind of question about a technique that you're wanting to learn, throw it out there and let's discuss it. I mean, got everybody on here, and I can tell you right now, just looking by the comments that I'm seeing and the people on here, we've got some hammers watching us live right now. So if you've got some questions, this is an opportunity that hopefully we can get you straight answers and how to learn that actual goal.
That's for sure. What trees do you use to make brush piles? Charlie, that's a good question. I don't think there's any solid right or wrong answer in my opinion. I've used PVC pipe, Christmas trees, sycamore trees. I'd say sycamore and PVC pipe's my favorite, but I'm sure Brad's got, everybody's got their own systems and way to use on the sinking trees. And I'm sure the podcast probably has something to do with that you're posting too.
Yeah, I mean, that's another good subject. And, you know, right now I watched Eric Cagle talking about him a minute ago on the podcast. That guy has a barge, I would consider,
built just for
putting out brush piles. And me and a couple of my buddies, we bought us a crappie structure barge that we're starting to tinker with and put out a lot of brush piles with, hopefully this coming year. You know, what I've seen to work really well in the waters for me is cypress, sinking down cypress. We cut a lot of limbs out of them. That way you can actually fish through it without getting hung up real bad. But cypress has been real good.
Absolutely.
Scott,
Our crappie, Ken, that's a good comment there. He said, we never knew how important boat control was without live scope, but it's really just as important without live scope. And that's really true too. Say you took the live scope away, you still got to be able to work the boat solid. I'd say even back when they were dipping trees, you know, Kevin Rogers style, the more trees you dipped, the better you were. I bet you had to learn how to get a boat through trees real quick, to dip as many as you could. And there's an art to that. Larry knows I catch myself going too fast lots of times. Larry, I can relate to that a little bit, but in my opinion, there's never too fast. Just, you got to be faster.
you know, speaking of fast, I mean, that goes back to everything before even live scope was covering water in efficient manners. And, you know, no matter what technique that you're going to do is, you know, being really efficient and covering a lot of water has always been before live scope. Like I said, Kevin Rogers style.
Yes.
He would go out and actually, hit a lot of the prime spots in that fashion.
He who dipped the most trees win the tournament, I guess.
Yeah. All right, what's the best setup? Casting the brush piles, rod length, reel, line, baits, etc. You know, Matt's been in my boat. That's maybe a picture from my boat. Actually, he's holding up there. But, you know, casting, I like a 6-foot pole. I like a 2000 series, something real smooth. And I've got from Akuma to Daiwa to whatever. I just want a really smooth reel, line wise, and kind of depends on how thick a cover that I'm going to be casting. Excuse me. I use a lot of 6-pound test. I like mono. I've tried braid. It just didn't work that well for me personally. Bait wise, you know, that's just whatever the fish are going to bite and how deep they are. 10 foot or less, I probably use a lot of times a 16th and 32nd, and they're going to be tied about 10 inches apart. But, you know, I use a variety of baits, but over the last 2 years, downsizing in the summertime has been probably one of my biggest keys to putting a lot of fish in the boat is downsizing in the summertime with those baits casting to them. Derek's got a good question there.
Bo Tisdale, I got a fish on Grand for you to beat me, brother. I've got all I need. I'm losing the comments here because they keep reloading. My bad, guys.
Yeah, Derek's asking about Hayden an interview, and I'm sure it's the interview we did after you won the expo. But he said that within 2 hours of pre-fishing, he knew that he was on the winning fish up there. And, Hayden, we still talk a lot, but that particular thing, what I believe he's referring to was those fish really fit his style up there. He found open water fish in that 10 to 12 foot mark, and it really fit his style, what he's comfortable with fishing. And that goes back to the home lake that we're on, Ross Barnett. 10 to 12 foot is a very key depth that the fish are in. It's always a good starting point. So that really just fit into his cards. And even if you look back at most tournaments, big tournaments around anywhere, these guys that go to these different lakes, they find patterns that really fit them. From Hancock winning up there, those deep water fish 3 years ago, fishing them 35, 45 foot deep. I think that all played into his hands.
Brandon Smith, that's a good question too. He said, notice a lot of my lakes, I'm seeing twice as many fish this year, but not the quality I normally see. Have you guys noticed that? Sometimes I feel like I do, and then the lake kind of changes. It comes and goes for me. Sometimes for a month or two, it seems like you can't find the big fish, and then all of a sudden they pop up. So I don't know if I really noticed that quite as much, but I have noticed last year was numbers of good fish, and you could load the boat with them, and it seems like you got to work a little harder right now. But come spring or summer, it might be different. So I'd have to be doing some more fishing to really say on that one.
I think some of these lakes goes in cycles. I've noticed one particular lake that this coming year on Ross Barnett, I believe it'll be a lot of 1 3/4 to 2 pounders caught in it, probably the most in the last 4 to 5 years. And I think it's just that age class had a really good spawn, and they're coming up in that size range. And it just goes back to how good of a spawn they had that year for that age class, what's going to be in that lake. Some lakes definitely probably been hit from overfishing, and that's happened everywhere in the country, and it's going to continue to happen. But I think a lot of it too goes back to those cycles in those lakes personally.
Yeah. What's the best? I'm going to go over that setup for casting the brush piles because mine's a little different. My favorite rod link to cast he's saying set up and cast the brush piles, rod link, reel, and line bait. My favorite link, the rod would probably be the 7 foot dingo. I like a 7 foot rod, the Huckabee rod. That's probably one of my favorites. I do go with braid. I know Brad said he's not a fan of it. If you find smooth enough braid, it seems to work a little bit better for me for not losing as many hooks. When I get hung up or something, I got a little bit more backbone of line to snap that hook off or bend that hook, but I kind of pop my line. There's kind of a little way I do it to get that off. But braid just seems a little stouter. If the fish ain't caring, then I'm throwing a braid. But something smooth, like you said, 6 foot or 6 pound or so. And then bait wise, that fluctuates just on time of year what the fish are doing. The reel, I love the Fluker Presidentials. I don't know, they're just price wise and everything. Those are probably one of my favorites. But there's also some at Academy that I get because I go through a lot of reels. I tear stuff up. I'm pretty hard on stuff, but they're, I believe, Quantum no, hang on a minute here.
Loose?
No, they're like $20 at Academy, and they work great. I mean, I have to look. I'll get you guys next time on that, but I want to say Quantum, but that's not right, I don't think. Anyways, $20, and these things have lasted me a long time and work. They're pretty smooth, so I'll have to comment that on there. So you guys look here later, and I'll put a picture of it. But that reel is one that I was going to let you guys know about.
I know one thing we'll touch on brush piles real quick. I know years past, before live scoping and live sonar, what have you, we always thought if we got hung up, it would scare the fish out of there. And it seems to me, anyway, that sometimes getting hung up actually helps a brush pile.
Sometimes, yeah, I've noticed that as well.
It kind of wake them up. And
yeah.
So I think, if you get hung up, don't leave that brush pile just because you got hung up at that moment.
Joseph Bridges, I would kind of agree with that as well. He said typically 3 or 4 years after sustained high water floods, we see larger quantities of big fish. I'd say because when those fish are spawning, they get to go up in areas they're not pressured. They get to go do their business without everybody messing with them. So they get to lay all those eggs and have a good, strong hatch.
Well, Stacy's got a question. How do you pick a color size jig to fish with on a given day, or you should use a minnow or not? You know, I think it goes back to fishing these lakes and that you have a history on. You've got to get a understanding of colors that usually work there. And if I'm going to a new body of water, I'm going to kind of go by in the beginning anyway. Dark days, dark colors, bright days, bright colors, natural colors. And then you look at water clarity, muddy, clear, muddier lakes, I'm going to use brighter and darker colors. And clearer water, I'm going to use more natural tone bait colors. Jig size is going to really depend on the depth and the how aggressive the fish are biting them.
Yeah.
There's some days that these fish actually want something that's moving relatively fast.
Yeah.
So I think it just depends on some of those different things, but hopefully that general standpoint will get you started on picking a jig color.
I'd say that also depends on the depth of brush piles I'm casting to, back to that casting brush piles, on what line I'm going to use. If you got braid and you want it to fall, it'll slow it down a little bit. So if you're wanting to get down there deeper, put bigger weights on. I like to use something somewhat light when I'm casting to stuff, because you want to drag it by slow enough and keep it above the brush pile. Usually you don't even, if there's big schools on the brush, you don't even cast into you don't let your bait fall into the brush. You graze right over the top of it and pick the fish up out of the brush pile. So usually I'll go somewhat light if it's shallow water.
Tim, he fishes a whole lot as well. He's using a Lee's Custom Pro Spinning Shimano pin. I see all kind of different brands. Tiffany Pace, that's a crazy woman right there. She's fished with me a lot. She knows she knows I know her.
Stephen Sullivan, that's a good question. At what water temp do you think casting and presenting a moving bait begins to work? Oh, gosh, that fluctuates a lot, but summertime you can really get them coming off brush and chasing baits with good movement, like good tail action. I kind of like to swing it by them in summertime, but also dead of winter when I'm fishing for these deep fish. They like something swimming by when they're chasing shad. So certain times when it gets super, super cold, though, and I'm in shallow, muddy water lakes, I can't cast something across them. So it depends on conditions. And for me, a clear, deep water lake, I'm going to cast something to swing it by them. They're going to come 5-8 feet and smash it. But in a muddy water lake, it seems like I can do everything, but you have to hold it for a minute plus just right in front of their eyeballs, and then they'll kind of slowly move up. So that's just what I've seen.
It goes back to my roots when it comes to crappie fishing, moving fast, just like you told everybody. I started pulling crankbaits and long line and jigs in the beginning. Seems like 40 degree and below, you just about got to hold it on their face and not move it at all. And, rising water temperature, I think they'll be a little bit more aggressive even in 40 degree above. I'm talking, I like moving baits from casting to pulling them to pushing them to even live scoping them now, just before we can go back and cover a lot of water. Crappie fishing is about covering water, really, because you're wanting to catch those active fish. Otherwise, you wouldn't be out there fishing. So you've got to cover water.
When you're talking about those fish you hold on their head, do you move it at all when you see the fish is kind of initiating towards your bait or target? Or do you hold it dead still even in the cold like that? You don't move it even when the fish noses up to it?
Once I feel like I've got the fish's attention, and on live scope, no beating around that bush, but you will notice a fish has its attention because it'll move just a tiny bit on the screen.
For sure.
And once I really feel like that fish has got its attention on the bait, either it's going to bite or it's not. So I'm going to generally start lifting it up, and even in this cold water.
Gotcha.
I've noticed if you ever stop that bait, most of the time they're going to leave it.
That's right.
So once I get that fish's attention, I'm going to slowly move it away from even below 40-degree water.
Right. That's what I was wondering. That's a good little tip there. Sometimes I see a lot of people live or chasing fish like that, and they keep their bait still. And those fish will turn and look at it, but if it's not moving or doing anything, sometimes I think they'll lose interest when you could have triggered that bite if you did a little something. 9 times out of 10, they'll see the bait, and when you see them dropping down, when they're doing that drop, you kind of, I've had a lot of clients anyway thinking that, oh, he's leaving. They actually will set up under the bait. So don't let that throw you off either. You'll see your jig. You'll see your jig sitting right here, and your fish will be sitting here. If you see it go down like this, that's them setting up for your bait. So don't pull your bait away or think it's over, because sometimes they'll be sitting here, and then they'll lower their tail down and come down, and then they'll sit there. They'll pause for a few seconds. But as soon as they work up, I'll start bringing it, and then usually you can get a bite. But a lot of times people want to quit when they drop down like that. And that's actually them getting ready to come up and whack it out of your hands.
We've got a lot of different reels. I don't think there's a
that
particular brand that's
good question, but there's a lot of good reels. Daiwa, you can't go wrong with the Daiwa. I seen Carlos say something about a Daiwa. Those are slick too. Ken's got a few.
What is your opinion on fishing technique while fishing from a pontoon? You know, a pontoon, I would definitely say it would be either casting the brush piles, long lining jigs, and pulling crankbaits. I think those 3 techniques for us fishing out of a pontoon would be ideal. You know, chasing open water fish or trying to spider rig in any kind of windy conditions, I think would be pretty difficult in the pontoon. Not saying people don't do it, but I think the 3 techniques that I mentioned would be
I'd agree.
the
I'd
best.
say pontoon for summertime on brush piles when you can just spot lock and cast to brush. That's probably the most comfortable, fun fishing there is. You get several people on it and have plenty of room. The boats takes big water good. How many colors does the Itty Bit Hunter come in? Slab Hunter come in? I ordered 20 different colors they had listed on the website. Woo! How many colors is there, Brad?
Well, if it was up to me, it'd be about 50, but probably about 20. So I would say he's pretty close to getting them all right now.
Yeah.
But I love jig colors. Anybody that knows me, I definitely agree with that. Well, here's another good question. James got. How are you presenting baits to fish suspended 4 foot or less in the water column?
Ooh, so it must be pretty muddy. If they're 4 foot or less, it's muddy water. I'm going to try to see that fish further out. And when I confirm it's a crappie, I'm going to probably let off my trolling motor and really try to just coast in there, float in there really close to him, 10, 15 foot, and then have a longer rod so I can keep the bait above his nose. Or use a light jig and cast it to him 20 or 30 foot. But you have to go light, and then you have to be really good at seeing a small jig on the live scope. So if you have a long rod and you're used to it, I would be dipping on top of those fish. Just because if they're that shallow, it must be really muddy, so you can kind of get away with sneaking up to them.
I think it goes, even back to what technique are we talking about fishing for those fish suspended 4 foot or less. I mean, pulling jigs, you can still pull jigs 4 foot or less in the water column. Now you might have to pull a higher pound test, say like a 10 or 12 pound mono, and you might get that shallow with a double 30 seconds on there or a single 30 seconds, but you can catch them long lining in 4 foot or less water column. Crankbaits with planter boards, you could do it. Of course, spider rigging, casting, it just depends on what technique actually you're talking about as far as presenting a bait. But there's several techniques that you can still catch them when they're in that water column that high.
Heck, I mean, you could spider rig them too, couldn't you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've caught them years past. I recall on Lake Washington and Grenada Lake. I mean, literally, we would see our top lead, our egg sinkers, right at water level and have fish hit them, 10 inches under the surface.
I've done
So
that.
it definitely, Tim's going to confirm it right there for me as well.
Yeah,
Spider rigging. Yep.
I would agree. I bet that would be a pretty good way to catch them that shallow. Once you set up and can still see them, that would be a pretty good method.
And it's extremely fun and frustrating at the same time when you're spider rigging in that 4-foot water column, because once they hit it, they're like a little jet hitting them, and
Take off on
they
top.
take off, and you've got to be really quick on the hook set, and a light drag would be another key to that for me anyway. I think push a single quarter jig. Tim's been doing it a long time. He knows. There's Chris Horton chiming in on the same comment.
Quarter jig.
Yep.
Yeah,
He's talking about spider rigging.
It is hard to get close to those fish in shallow water like that. That can be hard, especially if the fish are pressured. I agree with that.
There's Tiffany.
But I definitely would still. I mean, there's, like you said, there's several ways to go at them. I wouldn't be spider rigging them, but I'm sure there's several ways to whack them things like that. Depending on too how many fish are in there. I mean, spider rigging, if you can't chase single fish, sometimes you'll go and see one fish, and then you have to go 200 or 300 yards to see another fish. It'll take you a while to get over there with spider rigging.
Chris Horton giving a shout out to Russell Gates. He made some great jig heads. He did back in the day, 4/0 hooks on them. Wow. And that's definitely for spider rigging that shallow water.
Boy, man, yeah.
I think it's Russell Gates' birthday today, actually. So there's a little shout out to you, Russell Gates. Happy birthday, bud. Probably see you at Grizzly Jig, I'm sure, shortly.
When is Grizzly Jig? Is that the first week of February?
Yeah, I think it's going to be I want to say the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. It's the first weekend of February. It starts that Thursday afternoon. We're planning on being there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We're going to do a lot of podcasts as usual, and I hope everybody makes it. And I'm telling you, if you haven't been to Grizzly Jig yet, and you're a crappie fisherman, you better fill up your tank and come on up, or go on down, or what have you. But it's going to be a good deal.
Matt Stingley's got some good questions tonight. When fishing with live scope, how much time will you spend on a fish before moving on? If you're fishing with a big bait, will you try a smaller profile bait before giving up and moving on? That's a really good question. I would say depends on the circumstance. If I'm guiding or tournament fishing, and if it's a monster fish. If it's a monster fish, I'm going to try until that thing absolutely. I mean, if it turns up to the bait 2 or 3 times and will not eat, and then it finally either dives in the mud, I mean, that's a good question. But I'd say give it 3 or 4 shots, and I would never give up. Here's what I will say: I'd never give up on a fish if it's never looked at your bait or gave you recognition. If you see a crappie and you know it's a crappie, and you're putting your bait and you're like, it's just not hungry. It's not moving. You haven't presented it right yet. You want to see that fish move towards your bait. If it doesn't want your bait, it will still follow it. So you want that fish to follow your bait first. If fish does not follow your bait or turn towards your bait and just swims or whatever, you want it to react. If it's just sitting there and you want to give up to it while it's floating there, you've missed an opportunity, because it's either the water's super muddy, it didn't feel your bait, hasn't seen your bait, or it hasn't set right in front of its face. But don't give up until it either swims off, dives in the mud, or noses up to your bait. But if the big bait to a small bait question, if it noses up to my big bait or short strikes it, you feel it, tap it, and you're missing, you do that once, maybe twice, but usually I'm not trying to play with them. I would switch to a smaller hair jig or something, an itty bit slab hunter, something a lot smaller, because that little short strike he did on a big bait, he would have sucked a smaller bait in, and you could have probably popped him with a smaller hook. So I'd say that's why I always like to start out smaller. But if you're using a big jig and they're hammering it, and then you have some that are short striking you, I bet if you switch to a small one, you'd get him to bite. But don't give up on him until he gives you a reaction. But Brad, you probably get in on some of that too.
Yeah, I've got it's pretty much along the same lines as Dustin's saying there.
I get it kills me sometimes. They're like, oh, he ain't hungry. He ain't liking it, but that fish is just floating there. I promise you, they will react if your bait gets anywhere close enough or they see it. They'll react. It might not be a good reaction, but they will react.
Once I really realized that fish has seen the bait, and if he didn't acknowledge it and turns around and leaves or just stays put, I know at that point more than likely I've got the wrong bait on. And it goes back probably to the profile. So if I'm using that at that point, a big bait or vice versa, and that fish reacts, sees the bait, and does not commit to biting it, in my mind, I've got the wrong style bait on. So I'm going to change at that point, especially if I see more than one fish doing the same thing.
That's
if I
right.
see them reacting to the bait and not committing to it, in my mind, I'd need to change the profile at that point.
But you need multiple fish to do that too. A lot of people will get one fish. You've beat the heck out of them. You caught 20 fish in a row, and then you have this big fish that doesn't want to eat. Sometimes it doesn't matter what you put in front of that fish, it's not going to eat. But if you have other ones that have been aggressive, I wouldn't say just abort your whole mission and switch jigs and profiles and all that, because I would have 2 or 3 fish do it in a row. Then that's telling you something. But don't let one fish throw your whole game plan off. There's a lot of good answers here. Carlos says, according to how big the fish is, that's true too. If it's a medium-sized fish, leave him. There's more. And then Joseph Bridges, until he bites, downsize to the smallest jig and add a nibble. That's a good one. Carlos said he's chased one at Grenada for 30 minutes. I believe that. I have chased me and Ken. Ken's been in the boat with me. We have chased some fish a long, long ways, because sometimes you'll spook them. And when you spook them, they'll just take off on this journey, and you have to follow them until they either slow down enough for you to get the bait in front of them, or you got to keep trying to put the bait in front of them while you're swimming off. But I bet we've chased, I know we've chased some over 100 yards before they've bit. So it definitely just depends. Yeah, for sure.
Got Billy Hartfield. What would you look for fishing from the bank? That question right there, I would look for a map and see where I could access to some kind of river channel or creek that runs next to the bank that I could actually access. And it would go back to the time of year. But right now, if I was going to go fish a reservoir or anything like that, I would look for a location that I could get near some deep water.
For sure.
Some type of ledge that's bordering deep water. So that's what I would look for if I was going to be fishing the bank. But
I'd say look for bridges. I've noticed a lot of people this time of year on a few different lakes around here, people kind of congregate around bridges, and it seems like they're casting slip corks towards deeper water. So they'll launch them out like the second pillar, or they'll work around the, what's the word I'm trying to say, around the water break.
The eddies.
Eddies. Okay, yeah, they're fishing the eddies and just deep water around those. But around the bridges, I've noticed is a big congregation. So if you have some places with deep water around bridges, I know Ulaga around here, Big Hill, places like that, they really get thick and catch a lot of fish, people lining out in the bank. And Ulaga it seems like it's on fire right now. They're starting to smoke them big time at Ulaga, starting to school up and chase Roman schools around.
Either you can start this question or I will. I think
ahead.
this was actually from YouTube here, but what's the best color for crappie jigs? Name your 5, and I'll name my 5.
I've got them. This is my favorite one. All around every lake I fish, but Grand Lake's my favorite. Blood Shad, Bobby Garland. That's probably my favorite. Clearer water. Monkey milk. You can't go wrong with a monkey milk. I'm a big natural guy. Live minnow. And then blue ice or white ice this is the mayfly white ice, but blue ice, white ice, that's just for clear water, but that kind of breaks it for me. Even super muddy water, I know people go with big aggressive colors, but I've even found going natural in muddy water works too, because you got to think they still eating the same things. So if you can mimic that, in my opinion, it works pretty dang good. And I love a pink jig head. Just like you're talking about those pink crankbaits. These pink crappie pros, I put a pink on about everything until they tell me different. I like a white too, but I'm sure you've got different colors up where you're at.
Yeah, I fish a lot. The these waters and that probably a little bit more muddy than where you're from, but orange, chartreuse,
Oh,
a
that's
natural color like a monkey milk would be up there, and a silver color. And then also, one of my babies from 5-6 years ago would be a Grenada Gold, which is a gold color with orange as well. Those would probably be my favorite colors day in and day out. I'm going to try those colors just about every one of them.
An orange and chartreuse. Let me add that into my top six. Orange and chartreuse is one of my favorite summertime colors. It's right up there. Let's see.
All right, Tiffany Pace.
Yeah, I saw that. It's a good one. Go ahead.
That's the crazy one. Tiffany's, like I said, she's one of my Guy Trip customers.
Do you chase and make them follow it, or hold still when you're trying to get them to the bait?
I slowly take it away usually.
Yeah, do you hold it or take it away? I would say, yeah, don't take it away though until they start to follow it.
Till they've noticed it.
If that's what she's meaning by that, but yes.
Tim's favorite color is a minnow, he said.
Oh my gosh. John Mayo would probably say the same thing, which is funny. I got to thinking he's talking about feeding them meat last time, but he was snagging them. How are you gonna feed them meat when you're snagging them? Pink and white with.
We got a lot of good colors. Mardi Gras, Duffer Silver Rainbow.
I don't ever
salt
have
and pepper.
A whole lot of luck with pink, a full pink jig, but some people love it. I mean,
catfish love them for me.
Yeah. Do what?
I said those catfish love them down here.
Oh yeah, that's funny.
We've got another casting question.
Oh yeah, I see it. Go ahead with that one if you want.
Okay.
I just lost it.
13-foot. I've never really tried casting unless I'm casting out the long line. I don't know about the accuracy. I think probably getting it through the wind, a 13-footer would probably sling it through the wind. A lighter jig probably better. I don't know as far as accuracy, if you could get as accurate you can with, say, a 6 or 5.5 to 7-foot rod compared to a 13-foot. But,
yeah.
I do use 13, 15, 18, and everything else when it comes to long line. And then I do cast them out. And it seems to me those longer rods, I can whip them out further with the longer rods because it has so much, whatever you want to call it, force behind that longer rod and bend to really get them out there.
I think by that he means, by pitching though, he means doing the underhand, just kind of like swinging.
I got you.
Does that make sense? So
yeah.
With the 13-footer, what I've noticed is you can double what your rod is when you're pitching it. So 26 foot, you can take a 13-footer, bring the line down to your elbow or so, your jig down your elbow, and you can underhand it out. If it's super strong winds, of course, you're going to have a hard time with that, but put a weight above it, whatever. But when you're underhanding out, you can get it around 20, 25 foot pretty comfortably. So I would say, let me look back at it here. Yeah, there's no perfect reason for that, or no perfect answer, because sometimes pitching is better with a longer rod and sometimes casting is better. But I see a lot of people starting to underhand, even with the short ones, underhanding or the shorter ones, you can overhand a lot. It's a lot comfortable. So if you're not used to long rods, I would say definitely just go with a 6 or 7-footer and cast. It cuts through the wind a lot easier. Some people are starting to shoot. You see old Crappie Ninja doing that. Just like you're shooting a dock kind of, but you just pull it back and fire your jig out. That seems to work really well in windy days because you don't have to pick it over your head. And it's very accurate because you pretty much aiming your rod to where you want your bait to shoot at. So that's another good technique.
There's Matt with another question. Do you think color matters when using live scope when putting the jig on his nose, or if it's more of a reaction bite? I think he kind of answered it, exactly what I would say as well. Color does matter when you're trying to get that fish to chase down that color further. I think these guys are able to put the baits, in their mouth to say it probably doesn't matter as much as the profile does.
Yeah. Oh, gumdrop is a dang good color too. Somebody
Yeah.
put on there. I think it was my uncle actually. Slab Slayer gumdrop. That's a really good color around here. I used that when I was younger a bunch at old Lake Uchi. And it was funny too because when we would catch one on a color, say we'd have 4 boats tied up, you dang believe everybody's got that same exact color on. We'd be passing the same pack around till we were all out.
There's another purple and chartreuse. That's like I said, with the gumdrop, that would be along that color line would be purple and chartreuse. And
yes, for sure. John Gathright pitches a lot with Epic 8. Epic 8 for a windy day is another amazing rod because it's stiffer, and I just feel like you can cut through the wind a lot better with a little stiffer.
sling it harder.
Yes, absolutely. So that 8-foot, it's just a stiffer backbone, and I feel like when you have the lighter ones, you kind of will throw it. Feels like it gets whopped around, but that's just in really windy conditions. If you're a fair weather fisherman, don't worry about it. Yeah, I agree with that. Do y'all think color matters using live scope like the reaction bite one? I don't think it's. I think it all matters. It's reaction, but it's also the presentation, the color. All that's kind of a good combination. The color does matter, though. I would say.
There's another color from YouTube folks. Red, white, yeller. And white are always good for hogs. Okay. I would not, a white bait is always going to be really good. That goes back to kind of like a monkey milk to me.
What weight of jig head and why? I would say depends on how deep I'm fishing. The deeper I'm fishing, the heavier I'm going to go. Unless they're not super aggressive, then I'm going to put a heavy weight above the jig head. But if you're fishing shallower, you don't want the bait to shoot down 10 foot before you get to a 4-foot fish. So it's always depends on how deep. The deeper, the heavier, the shallower, the lighter. That's about the easiest way I could put that.
It's kind of goes back to why there's so many different colors and jig head sizes because you have so many different scenarios. I even started over the last 2 years when I downsized these baits. Some days using a 1/64th. Now it might be tied on along with a 16th or a 32nd, but that's one reason there are so many different sizes and colors made is because there's no perfect fit in every scenario for jig size and jig color. And so we can see in these comments, everybody's got some different colors that undoubtedly work for them. And it goes back to confidence in what you're using out there.
Yeah. The big confidence thing. How did we forget about Cajun cricket though? That's another killer too. There's so many colors that you will forget about really good ones. Sometimes you'll be digging through the boat and be like, oh man, should have tried that. Lou, here's a good question. Loop knots or straight knots? Woo.
Probably gonna be two different answers.
Depends on who you ask, but I better let Brad answer that one.
I mean, it's just like,
I guarantee you this. We both got 2 different answers.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a loop knot guy. I can literally probably tie that knot in my sleep. It's just a really fast knot that I can tie, and it fits a lot of different scenarios. The only time I really don't use a loop knot would be, pulling crankbaits and when I'm tying on a swivel. And I still use it even occasionally when I'm spider rigging. But loop knot's going to be my number one. I see Dustin, he's getting excited about this knot.
Right. I tie, which is a simple knot too, is a Palomar knot. Everything. No matter if I'm pitching, casting, dropping straight down on them, I just tie a Palomar knot. But a loop knot is a little, if you've practiced it enough, it's a little faster. But a Palomar knot is, it's somewhat similar, but I guess it's just tight to the actual jig. But it's, in my opinion, it's the strongest knot that I've found. I've tried a lot of them, and I feel like certain ones are weaker than others. Palomar knot, you get all you can out of the line. But like I said, everybody, I knew you were going to have a different answer. I didn't even know which one you were picking, but I knew it was probably going to be different.
Yeah. Crappie Crane, I'll go back up to him. He's from some of the YouTube folks.
Yes. Taylor Bryant, do y'all ever have a problem with the loop knot slipping through the eyelet of your jig head with lighter line? Yes, absolutely. That's kind of another thing too. I want to tie. I just, gosh, there's,
I'm touching that one too.
yeah, you got to watch your jig heads. I mean, it just depends on what jig head you get, but there is some that it don't matter what knot you tie, they'll slip through the. I mean, I've tied these Palomars tight to the eyes and slipped out of them with cheaper little jig heads. So you want to check out your hooks. I would say that's your hook's fault, not your loop knot's fault.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to using painted jig heads or unpainted. You know,
Yes.
an unpainted jig head is way more likely to slip through a knot, no matter what kind it is, compared to a painted jig head. So I use a lot of painted jig heads just for that one reason, because it seems to me that the eyelet actually closes up better. We've got some more questions. Okay. Here's, like I said, here's some crappie crane from YouTube, and it says, I seem to get knots tied in between my jig and egg sinker when I'm using a 16th jig head and an 1/8 ounce egg sinker 10 inch above the jig. What will you do to remedy this? To answer that question for me, you know, the jig head above there, I want it to be extremely light. So I don't know if I would use a 16th above it. I might even go up to a 32nd ounce. And I would tie a loop knot, have a leader off a loop knot coming out, say 10 inches. Clip it, and then do a Palomar knot at the very end of that loop knot. And that would kick it a little bit further away from that jig, but I would actually use a lighter jig head than a 16th for my top.
So
or just flat out.
Two jigs is what he was saying.
Yeah, he's running a jig head up above his egg sinker, and he's having a lot of knots coming in there. And I'm sure we got some other different guys that's going to chime in on there as well. Yeah. But that's what I would do. I would tie a big loop knot up above that egg sinker, either tied at the end of the loop knot, or either I would clip the loop knot and make a leader coming off of it. And it goes probably, like I said, back to what line size you're using, and I would go to a lighter jig head than that.
Yeah, it may be, yeah, I was going to say, maybe the way you're dropping it or casting it, vice versa too.
There's another YouTube guy, Randall. You ever throw crankbaits or big jigs for crappie?
I've thrown big swim jigs, but I've never thrown a crankbait at them. I've thrown swim jigs that were big enough to go for a bass or silly, like Ken will bring kind of off the wall stuff on certain, if we can't get them to bite. And I think he might correct me if I was wrong, but I think we put on like a 6-inch or 4 to 6 inch swim jig out there at Grenada, and he smacked one on it. And I was making fun of him until he caught one on it.
Right. I've never thrown a crankbait as far as actually cast them. I think a small 1/4 ounce rattle trap would rock their world, though.
I guarantee it. And crankbait probably would too, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. If you just get it down to that depth. Yeah, I think that would be the hard part.
Maybe those shallower water crappie, in the 3 to 4 foot range, if you casted a little square bill that dove 2 to 5 foot, right, and you just crank that bad boy right by them, it get their attention for sure.
It goes back if they're actually how aggressive they are.
Yeah. I was going to show you all this Palomar knot real quick, but I'm not sure how good it's going to show up. So you double your line through the eye hole. Okay, everybody says how fast the loop knot is, but this can be just as fast, this Palomar. You just do an overhand knot with it, and you have your, man, this has got me backward. But see this loop, after you just do an overhand knot, you have this loop. You just put your jig right through it and pull it tight, and that's done. That's how fast that Palomar knot can be too. So I feel like it's right there with the loop knot. It's just a different way of tying it, and it stays tied on the eye. You don't have your loop.
Going down here, we got
spinner baits and rattle traps. I believe that here recently, I was bass fishing with a buddy, and he caught a 2.5 pounder on a spinner bait, a big spinner bait, he whacked it right off the bank. So I would believe a spinnerbait would work just as well. Yeah, John Gathright, 4-inch swim bait makes them mad, and they hammer it. And I know where he's fishing on Millwood. They will. Millwood, different breed of fish though. They have to dodge alligators for a living. Okay, so we're fishing for two different styles of fish there.
Alligator. Randall, I'm not going to go into a big discussion over that, but we've got a YouTube question coming in from Randall. Do you think they should outlaw live scopes? And my answer is no. And I think they should have better regulations to control it than saying outlaw. We've got enough laws, in my opinion. So
Yeah.
I would say no, I don't agree with that.
I'd say they better. I mean, they need to study it and make sure that we don't run what we got going on. But as of right now, I don't think it's hurting it as much as we thought it would, in my opinion. I think everybody thought at first crappie were going to go extinct.
There's Bob from YouTube. Can you cast to them all year long? And I would say it's worth a shot. Under 40-degree water temperature, I would probably say no. But anything over 40-degree water temperature, I definitely think it's worth a shot in my mind.
I'd say you can. You definitely can. And even under 40-degree water temperature, even though I'd say the majority's still not going to want to cast, there's still some fish that are going to be aggressive and want to. So if it's your what you have most confidence with, yeah, don't be afraid to just cast at them. There's some days if I'll try everything. Some days one fish will want something, and you might go through another 10 fish before you find a fish that wants the same thing as the other. So, but the colder it gets, the harder it is to pattern them like that.
Nathan Wood, coming from YouTube side of things, but I'm sure I know this answer from Dustin as well, but live scope transducer on trolling motor or on separate pole?
Yeah, I'm a trolling motor for sure guy, but if I'm just fishing brush piles, I'm not worried about chasing single fish, and I'm fishing schools of fish or brush piles. A trolling motor with spot lock. If you don't have spot lock on your trolling motor, it's a lot harder to use a side pole because you've got so much going on. But if you have a spot lock trolling motor, don't be afraid to use a side pole mount either. We've been super good with that on brush piles and roaming or schools of fish that you have a little air room to miss your cast. But when you're chasing single fish, trolling motor. So there's two different answers. I wouldn't mind using a separate pole mount when I'm chasing just brush piles. You want to go up there, spot lock on top of them or off of them a little bit, and you can keep while your boat's fighting all the waves and wind, you can just keep your side pole mount on the brush pile. So there's two different scenarios for that. But Brad, you go ahead.
I would just say for the most usage, I would say on the trolling motor. If I fished bridge pilings, 90% of the time, I would probably have it on the pole. If I fished open water fish, I would have it on a trolling motor. I guess.
Yeah, when you have stationary fish, that kind of is
Right.
what I'm trying to say. Stationary or schools that you can kind of sit on. I wouldn't mind.
We just got a very good tip from Vince Haygood. Check the eyelets and use clear fingernail polish to fill the gap in the eyelets. Cheap fix.
Hey,
Sounds
maybe
legit to me.
maybe the fish like that little smell, that fingernail polish. You never know.
Well, that's true, man.
I'll even take sometimes if one's bad, I'll take pliers and try to crimp the rest of it shut, if that makes sense.
Baker from YouTube, he said he caught a crappie on a 6-inch swim bait.
I've
Out
seen
Lake
it happen.
Florida.
I've seen it happen. And the one we caught on that 6-inch swim bait was not even probably a pound and a half. So I've seen it, and I've pulled them out of their guts that have been 4 to 6 inches too. So you know what I'm saying? You've seen the tail in them. You've pulled it out with pliers, and there's some fish. I mean, they don't even make baits as big for crappie as some of these shads. So it happens. I don't have near as much big bulky jigs like that, but.
And Tim Howell just responded about the mono versus the braid question. I'm saying, Tim, that's a very cool profile pic you got there. But he's using braid for casting and mono for spider rigging and long lining.
You think they should lower the creel limit and increase size limit on small, heavily fished lakes like Lake Washington?
Yes.
It has to. I mean, you'd have to.
Yes.
I think it would make a lot of sense because we're catching more fish out of it now than ever. So we probably should lower that to where it's more normal. If anybody wants a mess of fish and keeps them for a freezer, in my opinion, they can go out now anytime and go catch a good mess of them. So why kind of don't let people overdo it too much. But honestly, when the fish spawn and we have a lot of people fishing without scope and everything, catching them by the hundreds, I don't know how much
Mhm.
it would make a difference. That's a good one to argue about all night.
Crappie Crane, he's from YouTube. With our tournament guide experience, it seems everybody's using drift paddles and trolling motor brakes. What are you using?
On my guide rig, I actually don't have any brake system. I fight it with the trolling motor. That comes into boat control. I'm kind of thankful for not having a brake system because it's taught me to fluctuate my trolling motor and keep my boat going. But I would definitely say a brake system on the back is a game changer. Paddles are super nice, but trolling motors are even better. So whichever one you can decide or afford, or that's easiest for you.
You know, I think on my boat, I've got 15-foot talons. In the summertime, I like to fish and anchor down with my talons. And, 15-foot talons, I can actually anchor down in 13 and a half foot of water.
Wow.
And sit there. So I'm using talons. I'm not fishing tournaments. I'm not just looking for those giant fish day in and day out. I'm looking for,
if the wind's blowing, will your boat still sit there? I mean, with the talon, it'll hold it good in the wind?
Yeah, the trick with that is actually having the back of your boat facing into the wind.
Okay.
So if you have it perfectly sitting with the wind to the back of the boat and the talons down, it will sit there. And I'm running a Ranger 620, a big deep V walleye boat pretty much, but it will have waves coming over the back of the boat and sit there.
Oh, sweet.
So that's what I'm using on my boat. I really
probably
like
not as much wave slapper shaking you up front either.
Oh yeah, I mean I like it because we can catch a fish and literally I can go to the back of the boat and change positions and the boat never moves location.
That'd be like pretty much having spot lock and a side pole mount because you're not using your trolling motor anymore. But pretty much you just have your pole mount on your trolling motor. That'd be nice. Yeah, crappie brakes, Vince. I'd have to agree. Crappie brakes are real nice. Those are a game changer. Having those trolling motors on the back are something else. Speaking of, Integrated Boat Works in Tulsa has been putting a lot of those on, and they'll work on your boat and install all that stuff. Electronic-wise, anything you need, they've got it, and they're top-notch.
Going back up here to Kevin Craney's from YouTube. I'm going to pull up this question. Normally fish Lake Gunnersville. I have a Grenada Lake trip early March with Eric Cagle.
Ooh.
Other than size of fish, what's the biggest difference between the two lakes? Well, I fished Grenada a lot through the years. I've never fished Gunnersville, so I can't really say a whole lot about Gunnersville. Early March, tournaments wise, I've got a 19.5 pound stringer on Grenada in March, early March. Actually, 2 in early March on Grenada. So, you pretty much hit a really good time to catch a monster. I'm sure Gunnersville's, what I've been told in the past, is a very good fishery as well. But there's not too many lakes going to compare to Grenada Lake, I don't believe, in the country.
And if you got a good guide, I mean, I don't know about Eric Cagle, but
that old guy?
No, that'll be a trip of a lifetime. If weather cooperates, that's the best time to hit that place. So, but the wind can absolutely swallow you. Just pray for good weather, and you'll have a heck of a trip on there. I'll actually be up there the first week of March as well, so that'll be fun.
Laura from YouTube.
What's up, hype man?
She wants a electric great color stroller. I like it. I like it a lot. I'm with you on that. Hopefully we get some of those guys from these bait companies. Pay attention to that one. Zeke.
Chris Horton, bring your tip money. Yeah, hey, at Grenada, you liable to need it. We'll have to get Zeke on here sometime too.
Well, Zeke's a cool old dude.
You dang right. He may know how to catch a crappie or two.
Yeah, I think he does.
Yeah.
We'll give him the benefit. You know, I couldn't agree any more than Tim right there. He says, you know, the great thing about crappie is so many different ways to catch them. And, you know, he's hit it perfectly in my mind, in my opinion. You know, we can't forget these different techniques that's been around forever from, you know, fishing on the bank. And there's so many guys that I see on TikTok to Facebook that are still fishing on the bank and catching fish every single day.
I'd say I'd still your majority of people still don't have live scope. I would almost say that.
Ice fishing is real big right now, and I mean, there's so many different ways to catch crappie that there's.
I don't know if they ice fish without those dang electronics, though. I don't know if that'd make me lose my mind. You have one little hole to fish, and you're freezing the whole time too. But I want to do it. I want to go ice fishing one time. That would be fun.
I've got invited a couple times, but I've never been yet.
It's hard to get yourself to do it, but I feel like I want to do it just to say I did. Big old blacks. I want to catch 2-pound blacks out of an ice hole.
Bob from YouTube, he says, do you think Spotlight trolling motor should have a warning about fishing under bridges that sometimes they go crazy because they lose the GPS?
Oh my gosh, yes, it should.
Yeah,
that's a good
listen
one.
Up.
Yeah, about throw you off the boat, won't it? Fishing a cork and jig and lily pads at Barnett. Money. Really? Where can I get one of those hats, Caleb? Hey, these hats are expensive, brother. I'm gonna have to look at that one, Caleb. We'll see. Limited edition hat.
Maybe you'll autograph it and we'll do a raffle.
Now we're talking. Now we're talking. I actually was fishing Spavinal last year and seen Jason Christie out there fishing. And I ran my boat up there and got his autograph on one of these hats. And I've got it in the room. But I just watched his YouTube video just a few days ago, and I'm on his YouTube video because he had a cameraman in his boat.
In the background?
Do what?
In the background?
No, they videoed me coming up and getting his autograph.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah. Little did he know he had a professional athlete asking him for his autograph. Wait till he finds out who asked him.
Tony Skeen is another buddy of mine. What's the average lifespan of lithium batteries for trolling, and are they worth the price difference? Absolutely.
You bet.
I've got lithium trolling motor batteries in my boat, and I've had them on there for, let's say, 2.5 years now. And previous lead acid batteries, I could get about 8 hours of trolling, and I'm using a 36-volt system. I always have, especially in this boat. With lithium batteries, I can get at least 2 days of hardcore pulling, nonstop fishing with lithium batteries. Also, I'm using a lithium Mad Scientist battery for my live scope system, and I think I actually can get 4 days of fishing with it before I have to charge my live scope system, and I'm running an independent battery.
I would say it definitely depends on how much you use it, how much you're using it, though. Some of the things last forever. Zeke Anderson, what's the difference between Oklahoma winter crappie and Mississippi winter crappie? Depends on which lakes in Oklahoma. Some are very similar to Mississippi crappie. Just a little bit of a size difference, just a little bit, in my opinion. A lot of 2-pounders here, and there's a lot of 3-pounders there. I don't know what makes that the difference, but it fishes a lot of the same certain shallow muddy water lakes. That's why we can go practice, certain lakes around here we can practice for Mississippi before we go up there to Grenada. We can chase the same style of fish around here, which that answer, so you may chime in.
Yeah. My mind on that is a lot of your lakes are a lot deeper than lakes around here.
Mhm.
I've heard you guys say in the past you're catching them 20+ foot deep,
Yeah.
and that's pretty rare day in and day out in Mississippi to catching these fish.
I know Zeke's
These,
got a few shallow muddies though, in the real shallow right now, even probably.
mm-hmm.
That's what's cool is that we have such a variety here. It seems like Mississippi's kind of leveled out in the same type of fishing around 2 or 3 hour radius. Here you can go to you want to go catch them 50 foot, I can take you to a place, or you can go catch them 5 foot. I can take you somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of a variety around here, but none of the lakes can hold them like Mississippi, Arca Butler or Grenada. There's just not the quality of 2.5, 3 pound fish. The number.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different lakes. That's
Chris Horton, your fish have bloody eggs. That's crazy.
Yeah, Chris, he's a
Second.
long time fisherman in the area here. He's fishing along the coast, which is pretty interesting. Actually, we talked, I think it was Monday this week, and he was sending me some screenshots of he's filleting fish, and they've got bloody eggs in them right now. And, I think them fish are about to spew them in January.
That's
along
crazy.
the coastline.
It all depends on where you're at, I guess. Oh, here's a good question. Someone asked earlier, is the 16-inch screen worth the money? For sure. I would say it is. I don't have the 16-inch screen. I've got a 12. I would say you can get away with the 12, though, comfortably. As good as you can with a 16. If you're not doing it tournament-wise or just wanting to go crazy, I think a 12-inch screen is by far the best bang for the buck. But if you're wanting to go the next level or next step, a 16-inch screen is a game changer.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your situation. I mean, that's a pretty good investment when you're putting a 16-inch.
Oh, my goodness. That's why I don't have one.
It would probably get in my way, to be honest. It would be nice. Maybe my wife's listening right now, and next Christmas she'll surprise me with that gift. But 16 definitely would be nice. I've been in several boats that have them, and they are definitely nice. And if I was going to fish tournaments, I would probably have a 16 if she would let me.
I agree.
I'm just kidding.
Nathan, 1,000% buy the biggest screen you can get. The 8616 is a game changer. I agree. Like I said, Ken has the 16-inch screen, and it is there is a difference, and you can really tune in on fish. But I would also say I have the 1222, and that's my second favorite. A 12-inch screen to me works pretty dang good. I mean, I could still compete with the 12-inch, but it does up you just a little bit having a bigger screen. Just everything. It's easier on the eyes, and you don't have to work as hard. But if you can't afford a 16, or it just kind of seems crazy to you, you could even get a 10. But I would never, ever tell somebody to get a 9-inch. Them things will absolutely kill you. A 9-inch screen will make you second guess a live scope and wonder how people catch fish on the live scope. 9-inch screen is tough. So if you're going to get a live scope, wait until you can at least get a 10-inch. I started with the 10-inch. It worked great. But a 9-inch will kill you. I've done training trips and stuff on other people's boat with a 9-inch. First thing I say when I get on there is upgrade it to a 10-inch. That's my first tip.
Call me back.
Oh, yeah, exactly right. Upgrade that to a 10, call me back, because it is hard. Everything, shad and crappie start mixing in. They start looking alike because your screen is so small. So the bigger the screen, it is definitely the easier route.
We got Bob from YouTube. He said he's got a nice dent in the side of his aluminum boat from fishing spot lock under a bridge. I never realized that. I mean, I guess I've never spot locked under a bridge, but
hey, do it, but make sure you're sitting down.
Yeah. Joseph said he's got a 22. I have a 22-inch.
Yeah.
He loves the 12 just as much. Wow.
Yeah, I would say. And I bet that 22 drains so much battery. It's unbelievable. So you'd have to have something going on there. Joseph Bridges, my neck hurts from leaning over and staring at that 9-inch. I'll say, get you a beat down mount that brings it up to your face, but still, get rid of that 9-inch. Man, you're missing out. You're missing out on a lot with a 9-inch screen. It may not look like it, but I promise you, you'll even, and it's crazy, 1 inch makes that big a difference, but a 10, inch screen makes a night and day difference. Oh my gosh, you will, especially since Joseph, I know you whack them already with that 9-inch, so I couldn't imagine you slapping a bigger screen on there. Hopefully your wife's watching this and I can kind of get you in on that.
Well, I've had a ball. Had a ball again, man. Definitely appreciate everybody joining in tonight.
You bet.
Make sure you hit subscribe on the YouTube. We've got plenty more shows coming on
Look, guys,
Facebook
I'm
as well.
upgrading what I got going on here. It's just going to keep getting better.
As you can hear, I got a thunderstorm about to hit me right here, but hey, make sure you subscribe, share it.
Thank you, guys.
Get ready for next Tuesday night. We'll be back at 7 p.m. And hey, man, I enjoyed it again, Dustin.
You bet. I'll see y'all next Tuesday. Thank y'all.
All right, guys. Holla.